Today we heard the second of three passion predictions that mark his place right in the very center of his gospel. Chapter 8, verse 31, we heard last week. Today was chapter 9, verse 31. In a couple more weeks, chapter 10, verse 33. Last week it was Peter who took Jesus aside to correct his theology. Today it's the 12 who completely missed the point about Jesus' mission. The 12 are like those who, in the words of Thomas Merton, spend their whole lives climbing the ladder of success, only to find, once they reach the top, that the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall. Their selfish ambition is on display for all to see. As the author of James observes, you covet something and cannot obtain it, so you engage in disputes and conflicts. Our misplaced desire is at the very root of our human dissatisfaction. Right in the very beginning of the Bible, when the serpent tempts Eve in the garden, the fruit becomes even more tempting when the serpent implies that God is jealous of Eve. A rivalry is created as Eve tries to differentiate herself from God. It doesn't take long for this seed to bear fruit. Cain kills his brother Abel out of jealousy. Again, the author of James comments, you want something and do not have it, so you commit murder. The wisdom writer is telling the same story. This time, though, it's the godless who are jealous of the righteous one. But their solution is the same. Let us test him with insult and torture, so that we may find out how gentle he is. Let us condemn him to a shameful death, for according to what he says, he will be protected. This mechanism of scapegoating and casting out for the sake of peace inside our group is as old and as tired as we are. It's hard for us not to center the universe around ourselves, because the moment we're born, in a very real sense, we are at the center. So then God does something beyond anything we could ever have imagined. God takes the place of the one who is cast out. The Son of Man is betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him, and 3 days after being killed, he will rise again. The disciples don't understand this. But of course, they don't ask any questions. So Jesus calls them into a circle around him. We can infer the circle from placing the child in the middle. And Jesus teaches first by word and then by deed. First, he says to them, whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all. And then Jesus teaches by doing what it means to be the servant of all, first taking a child and placing it in their midst, and then taking the child in his arms with the words, whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me. To receive rather than to expel is the mark of the new community of the kingdom. Because we love our children and often place them on a pedestal, we might imagine that Jesus refers to the child as an example to imitate, an example of innocence or simplicity. But in the society of Jesus' time, they had no romanticized notion of children. I think the mortality rate for children under 12 was about 30%. So in the ancient world, a child was a non-person. Without legal standing or personal power, the child was totally dependent on others. The child was one of the most vulnerable members of society. So when Jesus embraces the child, he is embracing the marginalized, the powerless, the most vulnerable in society. His action is similar to the famous Last Judgment scene in the Gospel of Matthew when Jesus said, "Just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me." We notice the picture Mark painted for us. We came down the mountain, passed through Galilee, went to the coastal town of Capernaum. Now we're inside the house, inside a circle of 12, and in the very center of the circle is Jesus with a child in his arms. Remember the story, it's in John's Gospel, chapter 8, the story of the woman caught in adultery? You know how they made her stand there in front of everybody? She was in the middle of the circle. The place at the center of the circle is the place of the victim during a stoning. And now Jesus and the child take that place. Jesus dramatizes the inclusiveness of the new community by embracing rather than stoning or expelling the powerless one. Our human bodies are sacraments. We are the body of Christ, and we're learning how to stretch out towards each other. It takes some effort and some work to change us, just as it took some effort to change the shape of our house of the church. At one time, churches were built to resemble the cross, but it does no good for buildings to do so if lives do not. Christ is here, at the very center of the cross, reaching out in all directions, including everyone in his embrace. We take our places around the center, and this centering changes us. It's no longer them and us. Gradually, over time, we lose our old identity. It's no longer me. Slowly, we are becoming part of a new we.